Hello and welcome to the Inside Drift Guide. Are you a player who wants to learn how to use Inside Drift in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Do you not want to slam into the wall every 5 seconds? Do you want to take turns like this? Or these? Or even this? Do you want to drive fast to destroy your opponents online, and not drive slow like a Mrs. Goody player who doesn't know how to snake, like this Daisy player? You've probably clicked on this video for one of these reasons. If so, then you've come to the right place, my friend. This guide will cover the basics of Inside Drift, advanced strategies, shortcuts, and much more, as well as some fun facts near the end. With this guide, I can guarantee you'll be driving faster than a Morton on the Circuit Special. I decided to make this guide because I know a lot of people that struggle to learn Inside Drift and want to guide them as they learn. I was also inspired by a YouTuber known as Shortcat from his beginner guide and pro guide he made, which I highly recommend checking out. So what are you waiting for? Grab your controller, get on your Yoshi bike, and let's begin. Before we go any further, let's talk about what exactly is Inside Drift. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there are two different drift styles: Outside Drift, where your vehicle sort of slides, and Inside Drift, where your vehicle drifts inside. The vehicle selection for Inside Drift is very limited, with there only being 5 vehicles that are capable of drifting inside. Those vehicles being the Yoshi bike, the Comet, the Sport bike, the Jet bike, and the Master Cycle. You'll most likely see a lot of players use either Yoshi bike or Comet because those are the only 2 inward bikes that have relatively good stats, since they both share the same stats with the best vehicles in the game, the Teddy Buggy and the Cat Cruiser. Now that you have a better understanding of what Inside Drift is and what vehicles are capable of doing so, it's time to go over how to drift with Inside Drift. For the sake of this video, I will be using Medium Me on the Yoshi bike with the rollers and the flower glider, though if you're looking for the best Inside Drift combo in the game, swap out Medium Me with Yoshi. To drift with the Inside Drift, start by going a bit wide, then gradually going tight until you've made it past the turn. It may seem scary at first, since you're drifting so close to the wall or off-road, but with practice, you will have nothing to fear about. A track I recommend practicing Inside Drift on is Toad Circuit. Toad Circuit is a very beginner-friendly track with a lot of wide turns, making it perfect for Inside Drift since they favor a lot of tracks with wide turns. If you don't own the Booster Course Pass, then I would recommend practicing on Mario Circuit. Before we go into the next segment of this guide, now would be a good time for me to remind you all to subscribe to my channel. I post Mario Kart 8 Deluxe content such as time trials, competitive play, documentaries, and much more. So if any of these things interest you, then I would highly consider subscribing. You can always unsubscribe if you don't find my content interesting. With that out of the way, let's move on to the next segment of this guide. Inside Drift has quite a few disadvantages holding it back from being as good as Outside Drift, although Inside Drift does have its fair share of advantages. Let's start off with its advantages, being Inside Drift's biggest advantage: when turning, drifting, or cancelling a drift, you will not lose speed. Inward bikes have a more slim hitbox compared to outward drifting vehicles, making it easier to avoid any incoming items such as green shells, bananas placed on the ground, and red shells using the wall dodge technique. When using your back cam with an inward bike, you have more visibility, making it easy to back your opponents with green and red shells. Now let's talk about Inside Drift's disadvantages. Inside Drift's main disadvantage is not having the ability to super bounce. Super bouncing is a strat many competitive players and time trialers use to drive fast. Another major disadvantage is that inward bikes can't realignment hop. For example, let's say you have triple mushrooms on DS Mario Circuit. You're approaching the 2 sharp U-turns near the end of the track, and the player behind you hits you with a red shell. You would think that using your mushroom and spamming the ZR button would be the best option to recover from that red shell, right? Wrong! Instead, your vehicle would end up going wide, away from the track. Contrary to having good visibility when looking backwards, your visibility while drifting forwards isn't that great. Something I don't hear a lot of people talk about are the physics when it comes to drifting mid-air on tracks with low anti-gravity, like Sky High Sunday, and floating underwater tracks like Piranha Plant Cove. Since anti-gravity and underwater physics are weird on Inside Drift, It forces your vehicle to turn wide rather than sharp when floating. Hence, the reason being why the Nisk on Piranha Plant Cove is a lot harder to perform on inside drift. Like not being able to super bounce, Inwood bikes also can't Kusan slide. Kusan sliding is a strat where after landing upon from a trick, you slide, increasing the speed of your vehicle for a short amount of time. Kusan sliding is mainly performed on tracks with a trick ramp near the starting/finish line, such as on Hyro Circuit, Athens Dash, or Yoshi's Island. Now that we know all of the advantages and disadvantages to inside drift, we can use what we know when it comes to selecting a track. Here's a tier list of what I think are the best and worst tracks for inside drift. Feel free to pause the video if you want to examine the list. We now move into the advanced strategies for inside drift. Our first advanced strategy is snaking. Snaking is where you chain a series of mini turbos by drifting left and right. This is one of the main strategies that pro players perform to drive fast. Next, we have counter drifting. Counter drifting is where you drift the opposite direction, then drift the right direction to charge a mini turbo quickly. This is very helpful as it also realigns your vehicle, allowing you to take a tighter turn. Lastly, we have counter hopping. What I explained previously about counter drifting is the same for counter hopping, but we hop twice instead of drifting. There are a lot of difficult shortcuts in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, such as the Mushroom Gorge Gap Jump, the DK Summit Double Cut, and many more. These shortcuts are very simple with outside drift, although with inside drift, it's a lot harder to perform, but with practice, it'll be a piece of cake. Here are a few iconic shortcuts on inside drift, and how to perform them. Let's start with the DK Summit Double Shortcut. During the bumpy section, aim towards the bump on the far left of the final boost ramp. Drift off of the bump, release a regular mini turbo while turning towards the right, immediately left drift, then as soon as you touch the side of the second gap, release a super mini turbo to clear the gap. Note that you shouldn't be drifting after drifting off of the bump, otherwise your alignment upon landing may not be the greatest. Dragon Driftway is a very technical track to drive. With all of its blind, sharp turns and well-known gap jump, which can be done shroomless, Inwood bikes have a huge disadvantage on this track. Though that doesn't make it impossible to perform the Nisk with inside drift. When approaching the right U-turn, start by performing a wide right drift, then quickly drift tight until you're on the curb. Once on the curb, press the brake button 2 times to maintain your tight drift while charging an Ultra Mini Turbo. Release the Ultra Mini Turbo, turn slightly left, perform a right drift, hop over the gap, then brake drift to avoid bumping into the wall. Make sure not to hold down the brake button for too long when drifting around the curb, otherwise you may take the turn too tight and fall off. Next up, we have the DK Mountain Gap Jump. This shortcut is very challenging on inside drift, so here's how to perform it. The main strategy here is mostly brake drifting. Charge an Ultra Mini Turbo at the first corner, charge another Ultra Mini Turbo while brake drifting, release it and drift on the upper part of the slope while brake drifting. Hold your drift when going off of the gap and release an Ultra Mini Turbo upon landing. This shortcut is very inconsistent and can result in many different endings, so perform this shortcut at your own risk. Finally, we have the inside drifter's worst nightmare, the Mushroom Gorge Gap Jump. After tricking on the first green mushroom pad, perform a left drift off of the other green mushroom pad, mini turbo trick off of the red mushroom pad, trick on the next mushroom pad to skip over the final mushroom pad, perform a left drift, use your mushroom near the ledge of the grass, hop to clear the gap, and brake drift upon landing. You might be wondering why we position our vehicle like this on the green mushroom pad, as if we were performing a super bounce, which obviously Inwood bikes can't do. The reason why we do this is for better alignment. Skipping the third mushroom pad gives us more time to align our vehicle when approaching the gap. Bouncing off of the third mushroom pad gives us bad alignment and can possibly send you flying into the off-road when clearing the gap, or result in not making it across successfully. We now move into the pro tips section. This section will cover how to approach certain parts of a track on Inside Drift. Let's start with the well-known ramp strats on Warrior Stadium. Keep in mind that Inside Drift ramp strats are a lot different than Outward Drift ramp strats. When approaching the first two ramps, perform a wide right drift, hold it until passing the final ramp and release an Ultra Mini Turbo. At the last three ramps, drive off of the first two ramps and then perform a left drift off of the final ramp. However, when wanting to go for the shortcut, trick off of the first ramp, perform a left drift off of the final two ramps, and then use your mushroom to clear the mud. We do this for good alignment when approaching the shortcut. Since inward bikes can super bounce, you would think that the fastest way to approach the DK Jungle Flower Pad is just tricking, right? Well, in that case, you're wrong. Allow me to demonstrate. When approaching the flower pad, trick off of the boost ramp, then as soon as you hit the flower pad, perform a right drift and release a Super Mini Turbo upon landing. It may seem a bit slow at first, but trust me, it's worth doing. Remember what I said about inward bikes not being able to counter hop? There's actually a way to realign yourself after being hit by an item, believe it or not. To do this, hold the A and B button at the same time. Doing this will cause your vehicle's back wheel to spin. From there, position yourself towards the direction of the track where you need to turn. When talking about world records, Inside Drift has had quite a few world records in the past, especially on 200cc, such as Vancouver Velocity, Yoshi's Island, Wild Woods, and much more. As of making this guide, there are only 4 current world records that use Inside Drift. Those tracks being Twisted Mansion, N64 Toads Turnpike, Tour Paris Promenade, and Tour London Loop, which are all 200cc. Looking at the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe World Record History website, out of the 96 tracks in the game, Inside Drift has had at least a world record on 41 different tracks for 150cc and 19 different tracks on 200cc. There was a category for Inside Drift world records on the MK Leaderboards website. Japanese player Yuya records the latest world records on Inside Drift, so I'll link his channel in the description if you want to watch some Inside Drift world records. We now make it into the final category of this guide, fun facts. These are just some fun facts that aren't useful for online racing. So for the Mario Kart nerds out there, this category is for you. When starting up the game for the first time, there was only one inward bike that's automatically unlocked, and that's the Comet. All of the inward bikes have the same anti-grav speed. Why? I'm not sure why, and I think it's stupid that they do. If you look behind the shields of the Master Cycle, you can see a Triforce spinning on each side. The Yoshi bike and Comet are heavier than the Sport bike and Jet bike. Ah yes, a mechanical Yoshi is heavier than a literal jet. Very logical. The Comet's name in Spanish is Torbellino, which stands for whirlwind, a bike named after me. The Master Cycle went from being the best inward bike on the Wii U to the worst inward bike on the Switch. Just like anti-gravity speed, all of the inward bikes except Yoshi bike have the same iframe stat. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of this guide. With all of this information learned, you now know how to use Inside Drift, how to drive fast, and how to demolish children online. If you found this guide helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. That way I will know it was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and also share this guide with a friend who might want to learn Inside Drift. With that being said, thanks for catching the breeze until the end, and I'll see you all in the next one.